What if I told you the math behind becoming a millionaire doesn't start with a six-figure job, an inheritance, or some overnight viral business idea? What if it had nothing to do with where you went to school, who your parents were, or what industry you're in? What if it starts with something much smaller? Something so quiet, so ordinary, that most people ignore it completely. It starts with your habits, the tiny, almost invisible things you do every single day. The file you save instead of spend, the decision to invest, not once in a while, but automatically every month. The book you read for 5 minutes a night, the way you track your money instead of guessing. I used to think wealth came from big moves. I thought you had to build something flashy, take huge risks, or wait for the perfect time to finally make a change. But the truth I learned, the truth that changed my life, is that real wealth is built in silence. It's built in the boring. It's built in the small decisions that are so easy to skip, and yet, when repeated consistently, become unstoppable. The people you see with financial peace, freedom, and options, most of them didn't strike gold. They stacked tiny, smart choices for years. And that's what I want to show you in this video. I want to walk you through the real math of how habits become wealth, how $5 a day becomes 50K, how 1% improvement becomes 37x better, how behavior becomes identity, and how identity creates results. No hype, no fluff, just what happens when you stop waiting for the big break and start mastering the small steps. Because here's the truth. Wealth isn't built by wishing or rushing or comparing. It's built by repeating the right actions when no one's watching. And the best part? You don't have to be rich to start. You just have to start with what you already have. So let's break it down. Let's get into the habits, the math, the mindset, and show you exactly how you can start building your future wealth today, no matter where you're starting from. 1. The illusion of big leaps. For most of my life, I thought wealth came from one giant moment, one breakthrough, one big win, one lucky shot. I thought if I didn't stumble into a business idea that went viral, or make some perfect investment move, or land a six-figure job before 30, then financial freedom wasn't in the cards for me. I'd scroll through stories of young millionaires, overnight success stories, crypto booms, startup exits, and think, okay, that's how people do it. They strike gold, they catch a wave, they get lucky. And I tried to chase that. I tried side hustles. I launched ideas and ditched them just as fast. I stayed up late researching next big things, always hoping this would be the move that changed everything. I thought if I just worked hard enough or fast enough or found that one perfect strategy, I'd finally feel in control. But here's what no one tells you when you're stuck in that chase. When you're obsessed with finding the one big thing, you ignore the small ones that actually matter. I was so focused on the idea of jumping ahead that I wasn't taking any real steps forward. I was busy but not building. I was always about to change everything and never actually changing anything. And then one day I came across something that completely reframed my perspective. I was reading a book, ironically, looking for the next trick or system, and I stumbled on a line that stopped me cold. It said, most millionaires didn't get rich quickly. They got rich quietly. Quietly, not in headlines, not in big leaps, not with flashy announcements, but through consistent, repeatable, boring behaviors. They tracked their spending. They lived slightly below their means. They saved a percentage of every paycheck. They invested early, not massively, but regularly. They didn't bet big. They bet long. And suddenly I saw the truth I'd missed for years. Wealth isn't built in a moment. It's built in a method. Not in intensity, but in consistency. Not in emotion, but in rhythm. It wasn't some huge leap that changed everything. It was the absence of quitting. It was showing up every day, even when it wasn't exciting, even when no one was clapping, even when the results were invisible at first. I started to realize that every time I skipped a habit because it felt small, I was skipping a brick in the foundation I was trying to build. And every time I restarted something new, a new app, a new method, a new sprint, I was tearing up the ground before anything had a chance to grow. It wasn't that I wasn't working hard. It's that I wasn't letting anything compound. And compounding is where the real wealth is. Not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's where confidence is born. It's where clarity lives. It's where peace starts to show up. Because when you stop chasing leaps and start building layers, your life stops swinging wildly between chaos and hope and starts becoming something solid. I let go of the illusion that wealth was out there waiting for me to discover it. I stopped hoping for a lightning bolt. I started focusing on habits I could control. 1% better, one habit at a time. And I can't tell you how powerful that shift was. Because once I believed small things mattered, I stopped underestimating myself. I stopped thinking I needed to change everything overnight. I just needed to do the next right thing consistently. And that consistency, compounded over months and years, became something massive. So if you're in that place, constantly searching for your leap, your win, your big break, I see you, I've been you. And I want to tell you gently but firmly, you don't need a leap. You need a habit. You need a system. You need rhythm. The quiet kind, the daily kind, the kind that feels unimpressive at first and unstoppable later. Because the illusion of big leaps will keep you chasing, doubting, and burning out. But the truth of small habits, that will quietly build you into someone you never imagined you could be. Not because of one moment, but because of 1,000 moments that finally added up. 2. The farther habit. After letting go of the illusion that wealth required massive leaps, I found myself asking a simpler question. What's something I can actually do today? Not dream about, not plan for later, not overcomplicate, just something real. And the answer, surprisingly, was embarrassingly small. $5, that was it. $5 a day, less than a fancy coffee, less than a fast food meal, less than what I used to spend without blinking on stuff I couldn't even remember the next day. And I remember thinking, okay, it's something, but is it enough? Because $5 felt like a drop in the ocean when I was thinking in terms of thousands, when I was overwhelmed by debt, or when I felt like everyone else around me was investing in stocks, building businesses, or crushing it with passive income. But then I ran the numbers. $5 a day is $35 a week. That's about $150 a month. And over the course of a year, $1,800. That alone blew my mind because I couldn't remember a single time I had extra $1,800 just lying around. I had spent so many months believing I was bad with money or incapable of saving, when the truth was I just hadn't put structure to the small choices. And here's where it got even crazier. I plugged that 150 month into a compound interest calculator. If I invested it consistently, just that amount, for 20 years at an average market return of 8%, the number that came back, over $50,000 from $5 a day. Not a raise, not a side hustle, not a dramatic financial overhaul. Just one small, automatic, intentional habit, repeated. And in that moment, I realized something that changed my entire relationship with money. Small choices, compounded over time, beat big intentions every time. Because intentions feel good in the moment. They make us feel like we're doing something. We say things like, I'm going to save big next month, or when I make more, I'll really invest. But intentions don't grow your wealth. Actions do, especially the ones you automate, the ones you don't have to debate every morning. So I did exactly that. I set up an automatic transfer, $5 a day into a separate savings account I didn't touch. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't exciting, but it started to stack. And after the first few months, something wild happened. Not just to my bank balance, but to my self-belief. I started seeing myself as someone who saves, someone who takes action, someone who follows through. Because every time that transfer hit, it wasn't just building wealth, it was building identity. And the beauty of the $5 habit, it wasn't hard. It didn't require extreme discipline. It just required me to stop underestimating the value of small. It helped me build momentum when motivation was low. It gave me a baseline when life was chaotic. It helped me recover faster from setbacks. And eventually, it became so normal that I forgot I was doing it, until I checked my balance and realized I had built something meaningful. Not by being perfect, not by making big moves, but by making one tiny decision every day and sticking with it. So if you've been waiting for a big push or the perfect plan, let this be your proof that you don't need any of that. You just need $5. One tiny habit, one intentional shift. Because the path to 50,000 and way beyond doesn't start with a leap. It starts with a quiet click, and then another, and another. Until one day you realize the habit you once doubted has quietly built you into someone who no longer does. 3. The 1% rule. After seeing what $5 a day could do, I started looking at every other area of my life through the same lens. Not how do I overhaul everything overnight, but how do I improve this by just a little and do it consistently? That's when I discovered the concept that completely reframed not just how I saw money, but how I saw growth in general. The 1% rule. The idea is simple but wildly powerful. If you get just 1% better every day, not 10%, not all in, not perfect, just 1% better, you won't be 365% better at the end of the year. You'll be 5x better. That's not motivational fluff. That's math. Compounded growth works like that. Small changes applied consistently don't just add up. They multiply. And once I understood that, I realized I didn't need to feel behind anymore. I didn't need to shame myself for not having it all figured out, because I wasn't supposed to. The real win wasn't in the leap. It was in the drip. So I started applying the 1% rule across everything, not in giant changes, but in small shifts. I began checking my bank account daily just for 30 seconds, not because I was obsessed, but because I wanted to build awareness. I read one page of a money book each day, not a whole chapter. One page. I replaced one junk purchase each week with a savings transfer. I chose to invest $10 instead of impulse buying something on Amazon. And most importantly, I gave myself permission to be in process. Because 1% doesn't look impressive. It's not exciting. It's easy to skip, easy to underestimate. But that's why it works. Because it's sustainable. The 1% rule is the antidote to burnout. It's how you build financial discipline without hating your life. It's how you invest without needing to time the market. It's how you grow your mindset, your emotional control, your money habits, your future, all without needing to feel ready. I stopped waiting to be inspired and just made tiny choices. I listened to 5 minutes of a finance podcast on my walk. I spent 60 seconds reviewing my weekly spending. I wrote down one financial win from each day in a note on my phone. These didn't make me rich overnight, but they built something more important. They built momentum. And momentum is everything. Because once you start stacking small wins, you start believing differently. You no longer ask, hey, can I do this? You start proving it. And that identity shift leads to even better choices, which leads to better outcomes, which feeds back into more belief. That's the compounding loop no one talks about. Not just compound interest, but compound identity, compound discipline, compound self-trust. And once you're in that loop, it doesn't matter how slow it looks, because you know exactly where it's heading. And the best part? The 1% rule meets you where you are. Whether you make $500 a month or $5,000, whether you're in debt or just starting to save, whether you're 22 or 52, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present and keep showing up. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or behind or unsure where to begin, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do today to get 1% better with my money? That's it. Don't underestimate it. Because the moment you stop chasing perfection and start honoring small progress, you stop being stuck and start becoming undeniable. 4. Micro habits that multiply. Once I embraced the power of 1% daily improvement, I started to look at my routine differently. I stopped asking, what's the biggest move I can make? And instead started asking, what small actions could I repeat so consistently they eventually reshape everything? That's where micro habits came in. The tiny 2 to 15-minute practices that seem almost meaningless in the moment, but when compounded, completely change your life. These are the habits that never go viral. They don't feel revolutionary, but they stack. And over time, they multiply into confidence, control, and real wealth. The first micro habit I added was this: track your spending daily. It took me 2 minutes max. I didn't overthink it. I just wrote down what I spent in my notes app or a simple spreadsheet. No judgment, just awareness. And within a few weeks, I started to see my patterns. I wasn't spending too much money. I just wasn't spending with clarity. That 2-minute habit changed how I made decisions. I no longer swiped and hoped. I started thinking, does this match the identity I'm building? That awareness alone saved me hundreds. Not because I cut everything, but because I got intentional. The second micro habit, automate $10 a day. Whether it was savings, investing, or debt payoff, I made it automatic. That it's $300 a month, done in the background. And what blew in my mind wasn't just the growing number, it was how I stopped thinking about it. I removed emotion. I removed debate. I wasn't hoping to save whatever's left. I was leading with action. And because it was small, it was sustainable. No guilt, no drama, just quiet momentum that never quit. Then came the third habit. Read 1 page of a finance or mindset book every day. Just one. Not a whole chapter, not a full podcast, not an hour-long webinar. One mighty page. Because what I learned wasn't as important as who I was becoming while I learned it. That single page kept me connected to my goals. It made me feel like I was walking in alignment. And maybe most importantly, it built mental compound interest. Over months, that turned into new beliefs, new language, and new standards. Finally, the habit that tied it all together, a weekly money review. Every Sunday, I sat down for 15 minutes. I looked at where my money went. I adjusted where it would go next. I checked my goals, looked at upcoming bills, and recentered. It wasn't a deep audit or stressful analysis, it was just connection. Because if you don't stay connected to your money will start drifting away from your values. That 15-minute ritual made my finances feel human. It gave me peace, it gave me direction. And the best part? None of these habits were hard. They didn't require me to change everything, they just required me to show up. A little every day. And that's why they worked. Because they were light enough to carry daily, but powerful enough to shift my identity. I didn't need to build discipline from scratch. I built it 1 2-minute win at a time. I stopped thinking change had to feel like a boot camp. I realized real change feels more like a quiet rhythm, something you trust, something you return to, something that gently rewires how you think and who you are. These micro habits might not feel like much when you start, but give them a few weeks, a few months, you'll wake up one day with a savings account you forgot you were building. You'll notice you haven't felt financial anxiety in weeks. You'll realize you've become someone who leads their money, not reacts to it. And you'll smile because it all started with something so small, it was almost invisible. But that's the magic. The things that feel too small to matter, they're the exact things that matter most. 5. Behavior drives net worth. The more I stayed consistent with these small, repeatable money habits, tracking, saving, automating, reviewing, the more something started to shift in me that had nothing to do with numbers. Yes, my savings was growing. Yes, I was spending with more intention. But beneath that was a deeper, quieter transformation. My identity was changing. I no longer saw myself as someone who was just trying to get it together. I no longer thought of myself as bad with money or not there yet. Instead, I started saying something I never imagined I'd believe. I'm a person who builds. That shift was massive because I had spent years living with the mindset of someday. Someday I'll be rich. Someday I'll be disciplined. Someday I'll figure it out. But someday thinking is dangerous. It keeps you passive. It keeps you dreaming, but not doing. It makes wealth feel like something that happens to other people, not something you can build from where you are. But as I built those daily habits, and more importantly, followed through on them, my mindset started catching up. I wasn't hoping anymore. I was acting. And those actions weren't just changing my finances, they were shaping my self-image. That's the part most people miss. Your behavior builds your identity, not the big declarations, not the dramatic life changes, but the small choices you repeat, the votes you cast for the type of person you are. Every time I saved $10 instead of spending it mindlessly, I was voting for I'm a builder. Every time I tracked my spending for 2 minutes, I was reinforcing I'm someone who leads, not reacts. Every time I opened my investment app and made a tiny deposit, even if it was just $5, I was aligning my actions with the kind of future I wanted. And the more I did it, the less I needed motivation. Because it stopped being what I did. It became who I was. I stopped saying, I'm trying to get better with money, and started believing, I take care of money. That's when wealth really started to build. Not because I was suddenly making 6 figures or catching some lucky break, but because I had become someone who could handle wealth. Someone who protected it, directed it, respected it. It wasn't just in the numbers. It was in the rhythm, the discipline, the growing belief that wealth is built from the inside out. And the best part, that identity wasn't reserved for rich people. It wasn't exclusive to those who had already made it. It was something I earned, one small habit at a time, one follow-through at a time. That's what changed everything. Because once you believe you're a builder, not a bystander, your actions follow. And once your actions follow, your net worth starts to catch up to who you've already become. 6. From invisible to inevitable. The thing no one really tells you about building wealth, real, lasting wealth, is that for a long time, it looks like absolutely nothing is happening. It's quiet, invisible. You're showing up, doing the work, making better decisions, and there's no parade, no instant transformation, no applause, just you doing the right thing in the background while the world keeps spinning fast around you. And honestly, that part is hard because we're used to feedback. We're conditioned to expect instant results. You track your spending and no one notices. You skip the impulse buy and there's no congratulations message. You invest $10 and it doesn't make headlines. But this is the truth. Wealth builds underground before it ever blooms above the surface. It grows slowly, invisibly, like roots spreading beneath your feet, quietly stabilizing you, quietly preparing something you can't even see yet. And that's where most people quit. Not because they're lazy, but because they don't realize they're winning. I almost did. I almost gave up when the habits felt small, when progress felt slow, when the number in my account wasn't moving fast enough. But I didn't. I kept going. I trusted the rhythm. And after a few months, I noticed something strange. I felt lighter. I wasn't panicking about money anymore. I wasn't reacting emotionally to bills. I wasn't afraid to open my banking app. That was the first reward. Not riches, but peace. That was the year 1 return. Then, as I kept going, as the habits stacked, as the decisions became more instinctive than effortful, that peace began to evolve. Year 2, 3, 4, suddenly I had margin, breathing room, freedom, the kind of freedom that lets you say no to pressure, yes to rest, and make decisions from a place of stability instead of scarcity. I wasn't rich, but I was free. Free to plan ahead, free to support others, free to leave things that didn't align. And now, years later, I can tell you the truth no one tells you at the beginning. After 5 years of small habits, you start building power. After 10, you build options. The ability to pivot, to invest, to walk away, to build something new. Not because of luck, but because of foundation. But it all starts with that invisible season, the part where you feel like nothing's working, but everything is being built. That's the hardest season, and also the most important one. Because if you quit when it's invisible, you'll never experience what happens when it becomes inevitable. And trust me, it does. One day you wake up, and the person you have been trying to become is no longer a future vision. It's you, not because of a miracle, but because you stayed, because you repeated, because you honored small, boring habits that no one else could see, until the results got so big, so clear, so undeniable, they couldn't be ignored. That's when wealth becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Not because you hoped for it, but because you built it in silence, in repetition, in full alignment with who you were becoming the entire time. Millionaires aren't made by giant steps. They're not the product of lottery wins, viral ideas, or perfect timing. They're made by quiet, consistent habits, the kind that seem too small to matter in the moment, but over time, compound like interest into something extraordinary. It's not about one massive decision. It's about 1,000 tiny ones. Spending with intention, saving just a little, saying no to impulse and yes to values, tracking your money even when it feels boring, investing even when it's only $5. These habits don't shout. They don't show up on social media, but they build a kind of wealth that goes far beyond money. They build discipline, identity, confidence. They build a rhythm you can trust. And the truth is, the math behind it isn't magic. It's momentum. Momentum created by small wins, repeated daily, stacking quietly until they become visible, undeniable, unshakable. That's how real wealth is born. Not from luck, but from alignment. And the best part? You don't need to wait to start. You don't need more money, more time, or a perfect plan. You just need one small step. Today. Because the moment you start moving in the right direction, you've already begun becoming someone unstoppable.